In this video, we're going to be talking about stop motion animation. So what is stop motion animation? Stop motion is an animation technique which allows static objects to look like it's live on screen. This is done by taking pictures each time the object is being moved. Each picture is also called a frame, and when all these frames are played, it makes the object look alive and it shows movement. Some of the objects used in stop motion animation will be puppets, clay figures, and more, as these objects are easy to use and can be handled easily. Objects/puppets are moved frame by frame to create an illusion of movement. How does stop-motion animation differ to various other forms of animation? There are many types of animation in this world, for example CGI. CGI is known as computer-generated imagery, and this means that all the frames and editing was done through computers. CGI means that the computer is the machine generating animated images, and comparing this to stop motion there is a huge difference, because in CGI every frame is computer generated, while for stop motion animation everything is primary, so you're the person taking the frames through a camera. Another form of animation is called cell animation. Cell animation is when you have a transparent piece of sheet and then draw on it with a black marker. Then you color the object you drew with the white fluid. You can then use another transparent piece of sheet and draw the same object, but maybe have it a bit different, like doing another action. For example, the first transparent sheet can have the object's eyes open, and the next transparent sheet can have the object's eyes closed. The characters or objects are drawn on these transparent sheets and then laid over a static background drawing. Stop motion animation is different to cell animation because you don't need to use these transparent sheets to create people or objects, and can easily use objects such as a stone. You can use these stones to make them look like they can walk and talk, and in stop motion animation you're using physical static objects to make them move around, creating smooth movement. In cell animation, each frame means that there is a different transparent sheet being used. So what I mean by this is that the first frame will have a man looking at you, and then maybe for the second frame this man is doing a different action on the transparent sheet. This will result in you having one frame equaling one transparent sheet. So if you have 5 frames, you have 5 transparent sheets. So what is frames, frame rate, and time lapse? A frame in stop motion animation is a picture that you take. For example, if you take 2 pictures, that means you have 2 frames. Frames are important because each picture you take is a frame, and when you put all these frames together, it creates movement. An example of frames would be if you have a notebook with the same object drawn on each page. All those objects moving slightly each time you flip the pages, creating movement, and this is also used in stop motion animation. So like I mentioned earlier, each picture you take is a frame. When you put all these frames together, it creates movement, which is one of the objectives of stop motion animation. There's also frame rate, which is important in stop motion animation, and what I mean by frame rate is how many frames there are per second. The less frames you have per second, the more choppy and not smooth the video looks. While if you have around 30 or more frames per second, it starts to get smoother for the people's eyes, and people feel like the video is playing smoothly. When people hear the word 30 FPS, it means 30 frames per second. And what this means is how many frames are there per second, like for a camera, how many frames is the camera capturing per second. There's also time lapse, which is usually on devices such as a phone or camera. Time-lapse photography is a technique whereby the frame rate is much lower than which will be used to play the sequence back. When the sequence of frames is being replayed at normal speed, you will see that the time is moving faster and lapsing, hence the word time-lapse. How is frames per second used in stop-motion animation? In stop-motion animation, frames per second is used to create movement in a physical static object. Like I said earlier, each picture you take is a frame, and the amount of frames you can fit into a second also matters in stop-motion animation. The reason why the amount of frames you can fit into a second matters is because of how smooth everything looks each time you're able to fit more frames into a second. In stop motion animation, pro animators normally work around the range of 12 to 24 frames per second. How has stop motion animation evolved? Human beings' eyes feel that 18 frames per second, also known as FPS, is smooth because of its blurring. In modern days, we see that films and TV are using 24 frames or more per second. Look at the movie Hobbit, they used 48 frames per second to create a feel of smoothness. Stop motion animation has been around for a very long time, around the same time as the evolution of puppets. When stop motion animation had started off, it was to create the movement of physical objects such as stones and toys, and then this then evolved into other types of animation such as cell animation, CGI, and puppet animation. So this is our research task. Our research task is to research 4 stop motion animators, so 2 pioneers and 2 modern day contemporary stop motion animators. My 2 pioneers are George Pal and Stuart Blackton, while my 2 contemporary stop motion animators are Henry Selick and Tim Burton. George Pal was born in 1908 and had died in 1980. George Pal was a Hungarian animator and film producer and liked to work around the sci-fi genre. George Pal was born in Hungary and had graduated from the Budapest Academy of Arts in 1928 and was 20 years old at the time. From the year 1928 to 1931, he started creating films for the Punia Films in Budapest. George Pal became an American citizen after emigrating from Europe. So what did George Pal do? Like I mentioned earlier, after he had emigrated from Europe to the United States, he had worked in Paramount Pictures when he was at the age 32, so at the year 1939. George Pal, being an animator, then started to create the Puppetoon series in the 1940s and was successful, as he was then awarded an Oscar in 1943. George Pal then created making live-action filmmaking like the film The Great Rupert. George Pal Puppetoons. George Pal was famous for the Puppetoons. George Pal signed a contract with Paramount Pictures to create the Puppetoons series. The Puppetoons was a series created by George Pal which consisted of animated puppet films which were made in Europe during the 1930s. 7 of these Puppetoon films George Pal created and had also won Academy Awards. Why is George Pal important? George Pal is important because he created the Puppetoons and had delivered entertainment to his audience. He was able to create these short yet successful films for his audience, and his audience was able to enjoy his work. George Pal was also able to sign a contract with Paramount Pictures, which is a huge film industry, showing that his work is indeed successful. George Pal is also important because he was able to create the Puppetoons, and this must have inspired countless artists and filmmakers. This is why George Pal was an important person, and when it came to stop motion and filmmaking, he was able to entertain his audience and be successful at the time. George Pal although died from a heart attack in May 1980 in California and was aged 72 years old. He was unfortunately unable to complete the film The Voyage of the Berg that he was working on at the time. The next pioneer is Stuart Blackton. Stuart Blackton was an Anglo-American film producer. He was mostly recognized because he had created the first silent film using animated techniques. He was born on January 5, 1875 and died August 13, 1941 and was aged 66. What did Stuart Blackton do? Stuart Blackton had emigrated to the United States at the age of 10 and had worked in the New York Evening World newspaper as a reporter and illustrator. In 1896, Stuart Blackton was sent off to interview Thomas Edison and how he used the vitascope. Edison then took Blackton to the Black Maria, a cabin which Edison did all his filming, and had then created a film on spot with Stuart Blackton doing a lightning portrait of Edison. As Edison was a success in selling the creation of movie making, he told Blackton and the partner Smith into buying a print of the new film, and 9 other films as well. Smith and Blackton then pushed forward and created the American Vitagraph Company. When this happened, Blackton ran the Vitagraph studio, producing, directing, and writing the films. This then led to increase in profits. So because of the increase in profit, Blackton had tried new ideas whenever he got the chance, so he developed the concepts of animation. The first of these films was the film called The Enchanted Drawing. In The Enchanted Drawing, stop motion animation was used, so the camera stopped, a slight change was made, and the camera was then started again. When we analyze the film The Enchanted Drawing, we can see that this was a hand-drawn and stop motion animation. What is interesting is the creativity, like how the man had thrown a wine bottle and glass, and then in the next frame he takes out the wine bottle. It shows creativity and the great use of stop motion animation. The synergy between the stop motion animation and hand-drawn animation was intelligent and creative. And even though it's a 2-minute video, it looks like a lot of frames were taken and could have easily taken a few months to around a year to create. Upon further research, I also found out the Enchanted Drawing was taken 18 frames per second. The duration of the video is also 1 minute 26 seconds, so altogether that would be 86 seconds. This then shows that the amount of frames in the video would be 1548 frames, so I assume that this video could have easily taken months to maybe a year to create. So why is Stuart Blackton important? Stuart Blackton was the first ever person to create a silent film with stop motion animation. This shows that he was a creative person and must have inspired many other filmmakers and writers. Stuart Blackton is considered the father of American animation and can be an idol to many people. Stuart Blackton created many notable films. Few of them were The Humpty Dumpty Circus, The Enchanted Drawing, and Macbeth. There is also the creation of silent films in the 2000s. Most of the greatest silent films were movies like The Call of Cthulhu or Stubble Trouble, and this shows that Stuart Blackton's creation of the first silent film did inspire other artists and filmmakers to create other silent films. Stuart Blackton had died due to a road accident. He had experienced lots of head injuries. Before Blackton had died, he had been working for a person named Hal Roach and was experimenting a method of improving color process backgrounds by using black light. My contemporary stop-motion animator is called Henry Selick, and he was born on November 30th, 1952. He is an American stop-motion animation director, producer, and writer, and is well known for directing the movies Coraline. He had studied in California at the Institute of the Arts and studied the program in experimental animation. Henry Selick was born in New Jersey, and his passion for animation had come at a young age. It was inspired by the two movies The Adventures of Prince Ahmed by Lotte Ranagir and The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad by Ray Harryhausen. What did Henry Selick do? Henry Selick had made countless films, and his most famous one was Coraline, which was a CGI/puppet animation and was the first stereoscopic stop-motion animated movie. Coraline had received massive amounts of positive reviews and was nominated for an Academy Award, BAFTA, and also a Golden Globe. In 2010, Selick had joined Pixar and the Walt Disney Company and signed a long-term contract to exclusively produce stop-motion films. He then got a new studio called Cinderbiter Productions and is a new stop-motion company, and its purpose is to create scary films for a young audience. Coraline was made at 24 FPS, showing how smooth the movie looks. Why is Henry Selick important? Henry Selick is important because he has created many stop-motion animations over time. He is now working in a company that made him sign a contract to exclusively produce stop-motion animation. And this is good because Henry Selick is trying to make stop-motion animation better and more advanced. Henry Selick is basically trying to recover the dying arts of stop-motion animation with new methods. My second contemporary stop-motion animator is Tim Burton. He is an American film director, producer, artist, writer, and animator. He is mostly known for his dark gothic fantasy films like the film called Beetlejuice, which was released in 1988. Burton has worked a lot of times with Johnny Depp and has become a close friend ever since their first film together. Tim Burton was born in 1958 in California, and when he was a preteen, he would make these short films in his backyard using stop-motion animation techniques. Burton had studied in the high school called Burbank, but was not a good student, but rather more interested in painting, drawing, and watching films. Burton also attended the California Institute of Arts to study character animation. So what did Tim Burton do? Tim Burton has created several films over time, and his most notable work was movies such as Batman, Nightmare Before Christmas, and Beetlejuice. His early career was working at Disney in 1982 and had made his first short film called Vincent, which was a 6-minute black and white stop motion. The movie Nightmare Before Christmas had also received an award called the Annie Award for Best Individual Achievement for Artistic Excellence in the field of animation. The Nightmare Before Christmas got positive reviews for the film's stop-motion animation, storyline, music, and was a box office success. Burton had again worked with Selick for another movie called James and the Giant Peach, and this film helped generate an interest in stop-motion animation. So why is Tim Burton important? Tim Burton is important just like Henry Selick. They had both made countless films over time and had also worked together in a couple films. For example, Nightmare Before Christmas. Both Henry Selick and Tim Burton has worked in Disney and have created entertaining films for their audience. Both of them has also inspired many people around the world and is making many stop motion films that will inspire more. So what is stop motion like in the modern day? Overall, it is unlikely that stop motion animation is going to become popular with the development of digital 3D animation. There's all the chances that stop motion animation will be revived and won't be no longer considered a dying art because there are still films like the upcoming stop motion film Animalesia that is gaining a lot of interest in the public and may bring back the stop motion art. Stop motion is a dying art because of time and how hard it is to make for many people. Although putting the time and effort can make successful films, and this is why I feel like stop motion will still go on as a filmmaking technique in the future. How has stop motion changed over time? Stop motion animation has really developed over the years, and even though it's considered a dying art, it has changed dramatically over time, and in my opinion, I feel like stop motion animation has been improved in terms of graphics and visual. Stop motion animation has evolved from its roots in 1898 due to factors like technology. An example of the improvement of stop motion animation is the 1965 film Clay, or The Origin of Species. That was a Grammy-nominated film because of the new type of free-form clay animation that was used in the 60s. This shows improvement, and in modern days people usually use CGI as a stop-motion technique as it's more advanced and you can do more out of it like the film Coraline. Thanks for watching this video presentation of stop-motion animation.